So you could say it's down to the wire.
The first stage of making pickups was using the new machine to wind coils. I'd done a lot of research on guitar pickups, but I couldn't find out if I had to alter the standards to compensate somehow when making pickups 18 inches long, where a 5,000 turn coil would have 3 miles of wire, and I was inputting the vibration from 50 or more strings per coil rather than 6, and using 2 to 4 coils to make just one complete set, corresponding to just one pickup on a guitar. I decided to just start making coils. Building a winding machine made it quick and automatic. That's why I did it. And if I wasted a $100 coil of wire finding out what worked through experimental error, then that's what I had to do. Guitar coils run from 3 to 10,000 winds, with most around the 5K range. I wound the first set at 4,500 winds to save a little wire in the first attempts, which was good, because I destroyed the first couple coils just trying to figure out how to get it done. I started with plastic bobbins that I could take apart after winding and remove the coil and use the bobbin again. Coils have to be potted, soaked in wax or epoxy after winding to keep the wires from vibrating, which causes feedback. I decided to cast the first coils in epoxy so they'd be strong enough to remove from the bobbins and handle safely while using them for experimenting with different configurations of magnets and casings. My first goal was to start getting experimental results to basic questions and complete the entire process to make a set of working pickups that I could start playing with and get some real-world experience. To make the first working set, I made 4 bobbins matching the bridges. 2 long ones to sit where the strings crossed each other between the bridges, and 2 shorter coils to match the far right and left bridges. I wound these to 6,500, though I was still just guessing. So I made 2 experimental coils, one to get a definite answer to how many winds to use instead of just guessing, and another to start exploring the possibilities in pickup location and coil shape. I made a purely experimental coil, which I've made a separate video about. I called it a step coil. It's a coil with 10,000 winds, but with a loop pulled out every 1,000 winds, step by step to 10,000. I'd be able to use jumpers to step from 1,000 to 10,000 winds and could determine the best range. I could also use the jumpers to configure it as a set of 2-step coils that could be switched in and out of phase in parallel and in series from 1,000 to 5,000. For the other coil, I modified the bobbin to create a wider center gap so the coil could slip over my center bridge and mount in the gap below the strings crossing over the bridge and above the strings passing through it, sensing them all. It was also just a wider coil. Sensing a wider area could make a big difference wherever it was mounted. I was also developing the process of winding coils. Learned from my first coils. I painted hot wax on the empty bobbin to seal any gaps and act as a mold release. Before I removed the bobbin from the machine, I sealed the ends with tape and thickened epoxy, then poured epoxy in to soak into the coil, doing one side, letting it cure, then flipping it over to do the other. On some coils, I tried putting thickened epoxy in the bobbin before I even started winding the wire. But it was time to get down to Florida before spring was over, because I had things to do before summer came. I had to visit my dad in Gainesville and keep up on my life down there. I wound the last coils and I packed up everything. I decided to leave the machine behind and really commit to this new plan to settle down at 1213 and focus on projects here. Though I did pack up the bobbins with the coils inside so I could keep working on them while I was down in Florida. Once there, I started removing the coils from the bobbins. I lost one coil immediately as wires broke sticking to the bobbin. I'm glad I used wax on the next ones. The epoxy hadn't fully penetrated the coils, so the wires came springing loose as I opened up the bobbin. I had a time carefully separating the hair-thin wire and getting it back into place, and taping it down. I opened the rest carefully, using popsicle sticks, twist ties, and masking tape finally to keep the wire in place as I slowly opened the bobbin. I then mixed up epoxy, thinned it really well with alcohol, and carefully dripped it into the wire to saturate the coils. I need a better process if I stay with epoxy, but I got what I wanted. A first set of coils, strong enough to support themselves and easy to handle. And they look beautiful, shining in that Florida sun. I also added long-planned short extensions to the top of the dulcimer, front and back, to protect the pickups where they would be extending out past the strings and the present body of the dulcimer. The bottom one would also hold a string that I never had room for when I first built the dulcimer, and the front extension would hold mementos that people had been tying to the dulcimer since the beginning. I still only had a short time in Florida and a serious job to do, finally moving my sailboat north up the coast to be as near Gainesville as possible, so the Coils were packed up to wait. I got to Virginia with barely time to pack up and head to Alaska. Just a quick trip to play the fairs, head to the wilderness to dig gold, and work a bit on my land, and then I returned at 1213 in October.